All right, everybody, welcome to Now That's Debatable. Back at it again with our trusted comrade Morpheus. I'm going to go ahead and get our faces up on the screen here in a second. And while I'm in the midst of that, AAA, if you'd like to go ahead and give a shout out to our lovely partner, Relic Media.
Yes, Relic Media. It's a podcast streaming service that's new to the market. If you have a podcast, it's brand new, you want to help grow it, get more listeners, join Relic Media. That's it.
Awesome. Yeah, we've been on Relic Media's channel for a bit. They have a bunch of other podcasts. They have a bunch of stuff going on over there. Um, not just us, but they have a lot of good stuff, a lot of good content. In fact, one of our some of our guests have been from Relic Media from their channels. They've come on and had discussions with us. So if you enjoy us or what we do, or if you enjoy what they did or like what they had to say, go check them out. As always, we have chat up on the screen. So if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you want to give your 2 cents, now's the time. Do it live. And if you want to come on the show, reach out to us. Say something. Say something in chat. Would love to have you on. Otherwise, let's go ahead and get this thing kicked off because today we're going to be talking about vaccines.
The jab.
Vaccines, aka the jab, aka the stab, aka the stick. That good
Yeah.
old needle.
Hey Morpheus, did you want to start off, or can I just want me start my position?
Whatever you prefer. I mean, it doesn't matter to me.
Okay. Well, my position was this has started from a private conversation that we had, like one of our disputes that we get into like several times a week now. And so we're talking about the vaccines and the rollout, and you were saying the scientists were lying about the efficacy of the vaccines, and then you talked about how it was immoral for the mandates. It was like a violation of freedom and a few other things.
Yeah, I think lying is a little bit of an extreme word to
Okay.
use, but I think that there were influences, whether they were financial or political, that led to the omission of data that took quite a while to get out to the public. But specifically, mandates. I was definitely against the federal mandate. I was against the mandates that they were attempting to establish for children, and really just the approach to vaccines in general. I disagreed with. So my baseline position is, given the circumstances of COVID-19, the way it affected specific demographics, that we shouldn't have had a one size fits all approach with the vaccine, especially with mandates. And there's prominent people, to include Anthony Fauci, to include top virologists at Johns Hopkins, who've stated really two things that are important here. One, natural immunity is much stronger than immunity that you would get from the virus, or not from the virus, the vaccine. And then it lasts longer, and it's better. It's the most significant immunity that you would get. And then number two is that hold on, let me, because the second point is important. The number
Okay.
two is, and this came from the Johns Hopkins virologist, there's a significant increase. There's a significant increase in myocarditis. There's a significant increase in the risk of myocarditis in comparison to getting the virus naturally, excuse me, and that risk wasn't taken into account with the mandates. And I had to take it specifically to keep my job, and I think that was a wrong approach.
So when you had talked about the natural immunity, like as in getting the virus and then your body developing antibodies, right? So like that's essentially what the vaccine does. I mean, it makes sense. They give you like a
Yeah,
really small portion of the virus, and it forces the immune response as in development of antibodies.
but there's
There,
two differences though, depending on the type of vaccine, and we could talk about the
well,
differences and the effects of
yeah,
the
I mean,
vaccine.
there's a lot of differences, but the main point that I was going to make was that the the big problem with relying on natural immunity is that not everybody lives long enough to develop antibodies. Some people, they catch COVID and then they just die.
Sure,
So,
no, I
so,
agree. That's why I
so
believe in the vaccine.
natural immunity is really just natural selection, right? The people that aren't healthy enough, including old people, children with cancer who have a weak immune system because
Yeah,
of
but
chemotherapy, they're just going to die.
so the
So
reason why, but the issue with that line of thinking is that what I'm against is blanket mandates, right? So what I am for is targeted, tailored um, uh, focus with the vaccine. So when you look at the demographics of people that are the most at risk, that
mhm.
those folks, that it should be highly recommended that it be mandatory for those folks. And that's a kind of a little bit of a contradiction there, because but I would say that if you were going to mandate it, it doesn't need to be for every single human being. That, let's just say, for the mandate that was for the government, it
But
doesn't need to
here,
be every single DoD, because we know that it's extremely rare for a person to die that's 18 years old, and it should. And we also
it's
know
not
that they have a
it's not
higher risk.
extremely rare. So it's a
No,
very
but let me explain.
small
No, it's
percentage.
it's
But
very
there's
small
a
percentage,
small percentage of 8 billion
but
people. That
but
means
you
it's a lot.
yeah, but you have to weigh the risks of myocarditis for one. So I'll give you an example, because I'm a good demographic for this.
Mhm.
I have a history of heart issues, right? Specifically, I have high blood pressure. I have a history of heart disease in my family.
Mhm.
And for me, having already had COVID-19, which means I had natural immunity, and having a heightened risk of myocarditis because of the vaccine, it didn't make medical sense for me to get the vaccine. And
So
that should have been my choice. But that choice was taken away from me. It was either, hey, you can either, pay rent or pay your mortgage and feed your family, or you can increase your risk on top of already the risk I had from getting COVID-19 from the
so
beginning of it.
tell
So it was
me,
double
do,
risk.
do you know what the risk was for myocarditis, developing myocarditis from
From
the vaccine?
from what the virologist at Johns Hopkins said, it was 27% higher in a specific demographic of folks. Like, you can look
So
it up.
okay,
I highly
sure,
recommend it.
but
Yeah.
it's the overall. The
There's
chances of
also a warning on the
the chance.
package
Okay, I just want to
of
let
the
you know. So the
vaccine.
chances of getting myocarditis from the COVID vaccine is 18 cases in every 1 million.
That's just one figure. You have to understand that
Okay,
it,
so okay,
that's not
that's a
fact.
lot. That is a
That's
okay. That's the numbers
that's
that we
over
have.
every single like. So you have to
Yeah, so
look
for
at, again.
so for every woman, so if there's 2 million, there's 36 cases. That
It,
means
it it depends
that's
on the
very unlikely.
demographic you're in. Biology is extremely dependent on the individual. So
Well,
if
the
you're a man,
demographic I'm
for
talking about is
instance,
human.
I
So,
understand that, but what I'm talking about is individuals' choice to weigh risk on their own instead
mhm.
of government mandates. And I'm telling you that for children and for people within the age range of, like, I think it was 18 to 35 or something, specifically males with a background of that has a history of heart issues in their family, and also with already what you might consider a comorbidity. it, those folks, it just doesn't make sense for them to take the vaccine, especially if they have natural immunity. Because as Dr. Fauci pointed out, if you have
So,
natural
okay,
immunity, that's better than the vaccine. So why
yeah,
then mandate it?
but again, not everybody gets natural immunity. Some
I'm
people
not
get
talking about
COVID
for
and
everybody.
just die.
We're
So,
talking about mandates
okay, so
versus
all
a
right, so
tailored
okay,
approach.
so here's the thing. So like, okay, let's say like somebody who could
Just use
get
me as an
no
example, because I'm a
okay
perfect example.
yeah okay, so
It made no sense for me to have to get the virus
sure you no
or
well, it does.
get the vaccine.
Okay,
Sorry.
so like, were you out in public? Did you go to the grocery store?
I
Did you
had
go?
already received, hear me out, hear me out. I had already gotten COVID-19 and had natural immunity prior to the mandate. Then I was
So
forced to get it, which I didn't need it, and then it
Which
increased my
strain of
risk of
COVID did you get?
myocarditis. It doesn't matter,
It
it
does
does.
because
matter
even
It
though,
does matter
because
no,
you can
no,
get
I've
more
already
than
thought
one
because
this
you can
through.
get
strain.
it again.
Nope, I've
You
already
can
thought
get
this
it
through,
again.
guys. I've already thought this through. I
Okay,
know there's
all right,
multiple
all right,
variants.
Are
give me
you
an
aware how
answer.
the flu
I know
works?
there's multiple variants. Trust me.
You aware how the
Okay,
flu
And it doesn't
works?
matter, because the vaccine only covers one variant,
You're
and natural
wrong.
immunity
That
only
is what
covers one
boosters are
variant.
for.
No, the boosters. So
The boosters
you'd have to
literally
have
have a
it,
different version of the
you'd
they have a
have to
booster for
virus.
have
Omicron.
They
you'd
literally
have
have
to have-
boosters for this exact
Okay,
purpose.
guys, there's a counter argument to that. You'd have to have unlimited boosters. Every year you'd have to get a new booster, and people aren't doing that.
You
No.
mean like the flu?
Yeah, just like the flu, exactly.
No, because there's not an unlimited number of variants, and then B, just like
Okay.
yearly, they recommend that you get a flu
Is
shot.
COVID-19 going to go away in the next 50 years?
I don't know because I can't see the future.
I don't know either, but
I can tell you that getting a flu shot every year and getting a COVID shot every year is better than getting the COVID and dying from it.
Okay, true, which is why you get natural immunity, which is the best. It's better than literally, I can show you the statement from Dr. Fauci. It's better.
I don't disagree that natural immunity is
If
better.
you've had,
what if it kills you in the process?
We're talking about mandates. The point is, if I already had COVID-19 and I already have natural immunity,
had a strain of COVID-19
in a demographic, it doesn't matter.
It does matter.
You could get it again.
You could get it again,
and you still have natural immunity.
You do not have it against the variant.
Yes,
that
you
is
do.
the whole point.
Okay, hold on. No. Let's say you get it again, and then you have natural immunity. You're fine. Then you go to the grocery store and you get in contact with someone who's a mother of a kid who's undergoing chemotherapy.
Yeah, the vaccines don't stop you from spreading it or getting it. So that's a mute point. You can still be vaccinated and still get COVID and still spread it, which was one of the issues with the vaccine.
You can get the vaccine and die from COVID. We're talking about minimizing risk.
Actually, 6 out of 10 people that died last year were folks that were already vaccinated.
You said how many?
6 out of 10 that died. I saw a report yesterday. Now again, you can challenge those numbers because there's a lot of numbers floating around, and I don't know.
I mean,
what's true and what's not.
The numbers that I saw was 87% of the people who were dying and being hospitalized for severe symptoms of COVID were unvaccinated. Those are the latest numbers that I saw.
Yeah, I saw 6 out of 10 because by the time you get to, by the time this statistic was derived, most folks had already been vaccinated. But either way, we can always dispute the data points, but unless we're going to like pull up the data points and look at the websites and all that stuff, my issue is, look, the vaccine is great for folks that have comorbidities and that have not gotten COVID-19. But when you talk about mandates for like children and folks that, the percentage of you dying is so small and you've already had it.
But it's not about you dying. It's about spreading it to other people who can't be vaccinated.
You can get vaccinated and still spread it.
Yeah, but it reduces the likelihood.
Here's the thing. That's something I have not seen.
So here's this is what we need. No.
You'd have to compare the two.
Listen, okay. So here's the big deal. So yesterday we had gotten to like a text argument. We were talking about the efficacy of the vaccine, and we were talking about, and you had suggested that some of the doctors or the specialists were giving misinformation about the level of efficacy that it would have against the vaccine.
The
facts
and the narrative around the vaccine changed over time as they gained knowledge.
Here's what was going on. If you look at the original variant, the original version of COVID that we were focused on, and that the vaccine was bioengineered to fight against, it was very effective at fighting that. However, what was going on was half the country, right, politicized it, refused to get it, and were just living petri dishes for the virus to mutate.
Would you consider me?
Let me finish. So as it was mutating, you were having different variants that were very different from the version that the vaccine was originally used to eliminate. So over time, the vaccine lowered in efficacy. That's what was going on. That's why we needed herd immunity.
Opposite argument of people that were vaccinated, that in fact the vaccine could have spread up the variability because of the fact that it wasn't being effective in human beings. So I've heard the exact opposite.
What wasn't being effective in human beings?
That because of the effects of the vaccine, that it would increase variance. I've heard that argument, which is kind of the exact opposite of your argument.
You heard that. I mean, what studies were showing that? Because I can show you.
That was from Dr. Deborah, someone. But I'm not saying.
Show me the study. Like saying you heard something that doesn't mean anything.
Sure. But this is what would prove. This is what would make me change my mind. How about this? We'll start here.
Okay.
If you could prove that, no, because that would still be to me the issue I have is not that the vaccine doesn't work for specific variants, and and here's the other thing with that. When I get natural immunity, it's not like that doesn't affect another variant. So I can get natural immunity of one variation of the flu or one variation of COVID-19, and depending on what changed in the new variant, whether it be the spike protein or whether it depends on what exactly changed, I could still have some pretty effective immunity. So to me, it's a matter of if you already have natural immunity, and and the other piece is to what degree does natural immunity versus the vaccine effectively allow you to not transmit? What's that percentage? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's just say I have natural immunity and then I get another variant, right? And then I get sick and I spread that versus I have a vaccine and I get another variant and I spread it.
This why everybody needed to get it. Like it doesn't work on the individual level. If you're the only one that's cooperating, then it's not going to work. Like, we need a herd immunity.
Dr. Fauci said if you get natural immunity, that's the best immunity you can have, regardless of vaccine.
But and the problem is not everyone gets natural immunity. Some people just die.
Okay, let me give you another example. Let's say you're someone like, let's say you're immune compromised and you have a piece of a cow heart. What's it called?
It's called a cow heart. I don't know what a cow heart is.
No, it's you know what I'm talking about. It's like basically it's like a vein that leads to the heart and artery. I think it is maybe what it's called. Anyway, there are like some kind of implant from another.
In fact, I know someone that has a part of an artificial heart from a cow.
I do. Not an artificial heart, but my aunt has a piece of one. But anyway, she's immune compromised, and one of the big risks with the vaccine is with women especially is blood clots. And so one of the things that she had to consider is like, to what degree is COVID going to affect me versus the higher increase of blood clots, especially because of her immune compromised part of her heart or whatever. And so I just think that mandates are too severe.
So I mean, if there was like a health reason that prevented you from getting the vaccine, you wouldn't have to get it. That's the example that the reason I was saying that was because the people that can get it ought to get it, because not everybody can get it. That was my whole point. So if your aunt was immune compromised for whatever reason, then of course, like, I mean, well, I don't think the rule would apply to her.
I would consider myself to be someone who shouldn't have gotten it based off of the facts and circumstances of the situation.
But it was very rare. Like, it's not 18 rare. In a million? Come on.
No, that's one. No, trust me, myocarditis is a serious concern for folks in the demographic that I was in.
But
it's not something to be.
It's not, but we're saying that the cause of myocarditis specifically linked to COVID-19, which may not have been the only factor in play, was 18 in a million.
No, that data point that you guys are bringing up is when you extrapolate that. No, you have to understand the data point.
That's
at least
fine.
The people listening.
I'll grant you. I'll give you whatever you're about to say. I don't care. I'm just going to ask you something because I think you might have a mild misunderstanding of how things work. What builds a natural immunity to something?
Exposure to the actual virus.
Okay, so do you think it's better on your heart and respiratory system to fight off COVID or to get a dead vaccine that your body naturally responds in a similar way with less severity?
That's not the situation I'm bringing to y'all's attention. It's someone who's already gone through that.
That's not what I'm saying. I'm asking you.
That's a false comparison. Because
no,
in my scenario,
it's a question. It's not a comparison.
Okay. But the situation I'm bringing forward is different than that.
Okay, that's fine. And I granted you can have whatever you want for your.
I think something cut out.
Yeah.
Okay, you guys still hear me?
So I grant you that your situation, sure, it's unique. Sure, it's rare. Sure, you have your opinion.
It's not rare.
18 in a million.
18 in a million. That's pretty rare.
No, that's pretty rare. You guys are just quoting a number. I already told you the number.
That's the
26% increase.
What do you mean we're just quoting the number?
You're quoting an. I can quote. I just
irrelevant. So look, let's say every person that took the COVID vaccine. No. Hold on. Yeah. Morpheus.
Think that number is
okay. That's fine. Let's say everybody that took the vaccine suffered some form of myocarditis. I don't care. It's not relevant to my question.
That's no. You guys are taking my
No.
argument way out of context.
Are you going to answer my question?
But you're trying to put
Everyone
me in
that
a
took
corner.
the vaccine got myocarditis. I don't care. Every one of them. All of them. They all got
Again,
myocarditis.
if you're listening,
now,
this is never my original argument, and you can go back to what I said. This is people who already
This
had
is me
COVID.
asking you a question,
No,
buddy.
I just follow
buddy,
train of thought. Let's see where he's going.
Buddy,
Okay.
just answer the
Okay.
question. That's all.
Okay.
This is not relevant to your myocarditis. This is not relevant to how many people got it.
COVID-19 has a higher. You have a higher
I already
chance of getting
granted you that.
myocarditis.
Sure. I don't
So
care
then
if
no, the answer is
everyone on the
no.
planet got myocarditis. Let's just assume that it is the highest rate possible. Let's say 99%. That is not relevant to the question I asked.
Okay, state your question again then.
Okay, my question is, do you know how natural immunity is built?
Yes.
Okay, and you're
I'm not a scientist, but I
own
think I
in your own
understand.
opinion, your opinion, because we can talk about stats and numbers all day. In your opinion, is it better to have someone to get a actual disease and have to fight it off, or get a dead small portion of the disease that their body will react in a very similar way to help build an immunity for it, especially if that person is already immune compromised? Do you think it's better for someone that may have myocarditis, that may have cancer,
complicated
or leukemia?
question.
It doesn't seem like it's a complicated question.
No,
do you
it
think
is complicated.
Do
No,
you think a
it's
70-year-old
complicated.
with cancer does a
Okay,
better job fighting
now you're getting
a virus?
now you're getting somewhere. Because here's
can
the
you
thing:
answer- can you
we
answer
need
the
to know the
question?
age. We need to know the
It doesn't-
comorbidity. We need to know the gender. We need to know if they have
it
a
doesn't
history of heart
matter.
disease.
It does not
No,
matter.
all those things matter.
It does not matter.
That's the point. That's why mandates don't work.
Is it better
Because
for you to
every
get a
single human is
disease and have to
different.
fight it
Is
off,
it better?
or
Is it
better
better
for you
to
not
just-
to get a disease?
Is it better to have a blanket mandate and not have a physician tell you if you should get it?
No.
Or is it better if you have a physician take all of your specific circumstances
in
into
your
account?
situation, is it
before
a blanket that everyone in the United States has
Yes.
to get it?
Yeah. No, not
weird.
the United
I
States.
didn't have to.
No. Okay,
Yeah,
you can
why
look
did
it
you
up.
have to again?
You can look it
Because
up.
I
It
bet
was
we're
a
about the same
federal
age, and I didn't
government
have to.
mandate.
Oh, so you
It
had
was
to
a
have one for a
federal
job
government
requirement.
mandate. I was already in the job.
I don't work for the federal government, so I didn't have.
Yeah,
to
but
have one.
it was a condition of employment. Like
Yeah,
nobody
and
was
also
forced to do
they
it.
tried. They actually tried to do the mandate to contractors, and that got.
Yeah,
they
but-
didn't make. They
but
didn't make
But
the
my-
legal.
my
But what
point
I'm saying,
being
like,
that
you're
it wasn't a-
you're
it wasn't
not
a
you're not
government
forced.
mandate.
What I'm saying,
Okay,
you're not forced to have the government. You're not forced
See,
to have the
now
vaccine.
you guys have pivoted
But
to
no,
a different
but hold on.
argument.
Well,
Understand
that's
that.
just my whole point. to
Any,
begin with.
anyone
gonna-
listening is they're pivoting from the argument of should there be mandates to now it's a condition of employment. No, that's not the point. The point is mandates don't work. There are
What do you
I mean,
mean
mandates
that-
would
that
work,
don't
but we
work?
just didn't follow
so
them.
let me. Okay,
I don't know. I mean,
there
every time
are-
we say something, you say,
I can't.
listeners, hang on. Let me break this down for you.
Yes,
Maybe
yeah,
I can do
because
that
it's
for you
easy to
every
be
time you open
misled.
your mouth.
It's easy to be misguided because let me tell you
So-
something.
All right,
There are
listeners, pay
certain
attention.
situations. There are certain situations where yes, mandates are necessary, and I agree with that. But in the case of COVID-19, in the situation that I'm bringing up, someone who's already had COVID-19 and is being told they need to take the vaccine, and they have these certain criteria, these circumstances, there should be a way that you can have an outlet to not have to go that route. That's my only point.
You
We
have
agree
a
on like
legitimate reason for it.
95%. Everything else.
Yeah, like I work with somebody who wasn't vaccinated because of health reasons. So, but when you describe mandate, it's almost like you're saying it's forced to. It was just a condition of employment. You weren't forced to get the vaccine any more than you were forced to pass the Sec Plus exam, right? But it's just part of the job requirement.
So when the government tells you what you need to put in your body and you have to do an attestation form, which is you attesting and telling them what they're going to do, and then there's consequences where you can lose your employment and things like that. You
don't have a right to the job.
Okay.
Were you military
this is
out
a-
of curiosity? Have you ever traveled overseas to another country by chance?
Yes, I've gotten
okay.
all of those
So you
anthrax
traveled-
shots and everything else.
All
But
right,
the
sweet.
point I'm trying to make is
My point, were you forced to get them?
yes.
Yes,
I mean, you
because
could
you
kind
wanted
of-
to go, right? You didn't have to go.
This is a different
no
argument.
one forced
guys.
you to go there.
This is a different argument.
This is the exact same argument.
It's not. It's not. It's in. We're talking about a principle here. It's a principle. Should we mandate things? I knew a lot of people that did not want to get their anthrax, the 7 or whatever 5 anthrax shots that you had to get, that only protected you from one specific strain that was never used. I think that there should be room, and we should be open to the fact that not everyone should have mandated, like if it's typhoid fever or if it's something that's very serious, then that's a different. If the death rate is above, say, 4% or something, maybe we have a different policy. But when you've got something that is very low,
it's not just about the death rate.
It's a very low death rate, and you've already had it. Then why would you still force the person?
Morpheus. So but here's the thing. Like, it's not just about the death rate, right? People were getting sick and overflooding hospitals, which means people who needed like emergency treatment for other things
again show me that the vaccine gave you a higher probability of not spreading it than the COVID-19 natural immunity, which is supposed to be better. And I'll agree with you.
We already went through this.
I haven't seen that.
Natural immunity only works if you survive the virus. A lot of people wouldn't. A lot of people did it. They just died.
In this scenario,
you have to get it, and you have to get multiple versions of the virus for each variant.
Dude, you said natural immunity is just natural selection. That's what you're arguing for.
That's kind of the whole point of the reason I asked the question in the way I did. Because what I'm saying is that if you have someone that is elderly or has pre-existing conditions, what do you think would be a wiser choice? For them to have to fight off COVID, or for them to get a vaccine that would simulate lesser
100%
symptoms?
Vaccine. But that's not my argument.
So what we're saying...
I wouldn't disagree with you there. The disagreement is when someone is healthy or they're in a position where they've already gained natural immunity. And in this scenario, the vaccine didn't keep you from spreading it or getting it. So you have two situations. One that's better, that's natural immunity. That's Dr. Fauci. He stated it on live television. Natural immunity is better. And if you've already passed that gate, should we still mandate someone to impose a risk on themselves from myocarditis to get a vaccine that doesn't do anything better for you? That's my point. Now, if you have another variation in, say, a year or something or 6 months, and
it was every 4 at this rate.
Well, I mean, and that's the question. Like, and some of this stuff is a gap in my knowledge. I'm completely open to say I don't know what the difference in the pass on rate, or I don't know what the technical term is. I don't know what the difference is in passing on a new strain if you have natural immunity versus a vaccine from a previous variant. And that will certainly probably be different if you have immunity from one variation and you have a vaccine from the newest variation, let's say. But even if you had a vaccination from a new variation, oftentimes there's multiple variations at play. You could have more than one variation that you weren't vaccinated for that you could still get. My thing is, blanket mandates is harsh to me.
I don't think it was a blanket mandate.
It wasn't for civilians. They tried to do it with contractors, but that didn't work. And they did it for federal government employees, and there were people who lost their jobs.
There were always exemptions in place.
You could get a medical exemption, but it was difficult to do.
You had to prove that you were actually at increased risk.
Yeah, but I'll give you an example. If you're an 18-year-old healthy Marine, for instance, and you already had COVID-19 and you were fine, it lasted 2 days or whatever. The question is why mandate that to that healthy person who's already gotten natural immunity, who's at an extremely low risk? You keep bringing that up as if the vaccine does something different. The vaccine, you can still get COVID and you can still spread it.
Yes, but it decreases your likelihood of getting COVID.
I've never seen that. In fact, my
clinical studies
got COVID twice after she was vaccinated.
Okay, do you know how vaccines work?
Do you know that you shouldn't get it twice after you got vaccinated? That's just one person in my family. I know what you shouldn't do, but I know that's an anomaly. It's not an anomaly. It happens all the time.
It is an anomaly.
When 6 out of 10 people die that are already vaccinated, that's one statistic
out of curiosity,
for you.
Do you know any of the stats on the efficacy of COVID-19, just for fun?
on the efficacy of the vaccine, you're saying?
Yeah, the efficacy of COVID-19. I mean, you can look at
I've
specific.
I've read
like
and crunched numbers. Like, I mean, that's one thing I used to do was go on the CDC page, and I used to have some really great statistics off the top of my head. Like, for instance, like you were like 8 times more likely to die on your way to work if you were a male from age 18 to 26 than you were to get COVID-19 and die. Eight
Yeah,
times more likely.
you're more likely to get in a car crash within 4 miles of your house, but that's not really relevant to the
No,
conversation.
it's extremely relevant because you're talking about weighing the risks of certain things. Now,
Okay, and
we
the
care
risk
so
of you
much
coming into
about something
contact with
that's eight
someone that
times less.
can
8 times less.
but
We
you're
care
not the
so much
only
about it.
one, bro. You're not the
Yes.
only person
And
that you're
guess what?
coming
When
into
you get
contact with.
vaccinated, you're not the only one that can spread it too. That's the problem with y'all's argument. If you
Okay,
could prove that you couldn't spread it,
would it help? Would it help? I can prove it. You ready? Are you ready?
that you can spread it after getting vaccinated, I already know that.
Your reduced likelihood of spreading it after receiving a vaccine.
I'll listen to a data point, of course. Yeah.
Okay, cool. The lowest of any of the top 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 vaccines after receiving an initial dose and a booster, and 21 days after receiving both, the lowest rate recorded was 79% efficacy rate.
Over what period of time?
After 21 days.
Here's the question, because those
79% of people never contracted COVID after receiving both doses.
So there's 2 data points that you'd have to provide that in order to. There's 2 data points you'd have to provide to make that data source relevant. One is if they're comparing against non-vaccinated people, then that would make sense.
Yeah, they're comparing against non-vaccinated and other vaccines.
So, okay, but the other data point you're missing, there's 2 data points really, but the one that's important is, what about folks who have natural immunity? Number 1. And number 2, what about folks who have natural immunity first? No, let me make this point.
There's a hang up here.
No,
because you keep bringing up this point, and I don't know
this
why.
This is an important point. If you guys can't let me make this point, then we've lost our ability to debate legitimately. Those are legitimate data points. I'm not arguing with those, but I'm saying that in order to make those relevant, in order to really understand what they mean, we would need a data point of passing on COVID-19 after you have natural immunity, and then you would need passing on COVID-19 after you have natural immunity over a period of time, so 30, 60, 90, 120 days, because that would only give that. I mean, I agree that those numbers could be true, but that's people who aren't vaccinated and have never gotten COVID-19. That's a big difference.
So, all right. So here's the thing. So what we're trying to do is get mass vaccination, the mass people vaccinated to have herd immunity. That way you can eliminate the virus to the point where it's like people getting smallpox or some of these old polio stuff like that. Like, you never hear people getting that anymore, right? If you rely on natural immunity, that in that case, the people who aren't healthy enough to develop the antibodies, they're just going to die, right? And that's just going to leave a population of people who are resistant to it. That's not what we want. That's natural selection. That's nature's way of doing it. We want to save as many people as we can. So we're trying to. So the reason why we're not relying on natural immunity is because we don't want to let natural selection, and we don't want to let.
I'm not arguing for that.
Okay, but
there are a lot of people that need to take the vaccine.
That's exactly what you would get.
All I'm saying is that sometimes why do you don't need to take it.
Okay, no, but why do you keep bringing up natural immunity? Because
it's better than the vaccines. That was stated.
Sure. Okay.
By the CDC
no. Hold on. Okay. Let's talk about like polio, for instance, right? Let's say it was. I don't know if it was the case, but let's say it was that the antibodies developed naturally from polio were more effective than the ones developed from the vaccine. Either way. Either way, this is natural selection. The people who aren't healthy enough just die. That's what we're trying to prevent. We don't care if the natural way is more efficient. The problem is the natural way causes a lot of death, and that's what we don't want.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about people that never gotten COVID. I'm talking about people that have already gotten it and survived.
Okay, but like, do you know how vaccines in general work? Like polio, like polio doesn't exist.
So with
anymore, right?
polio, so let me I'm going to go out on a limb with polio, my
Okay,
basic knowledge of polio, but
sure.
I would assume that most people that got polio died versus survived, and so it made way more sense to have a vaccine mandate, because there's not a lot of people that had the natural immunity. It was very
But
dangerous.
that's kind of like saying most people that get shot survive.
No, I'm just saying there's a much higher number of folks that got COVID and were fine than got polio and were fine. I mean,
But like what you're doing is you're
spread like crazy.
what you're doing is excluding people who don't have the ability to fight it off. Like what's wrong with trying to save those people's life?
Nothing. There's a lot of people that should take the vaccine.
Wouldn't you think it would be a good thing to like do your part to reduce the risk of like them dying?
If you already had it and you already have natural immunity, there's no reason for you to take the vaccine.
There is still, because there are variations.
And you still have protection based off of your original
You do
immunity.
not have it against variations, which is why they continually release boosters.
That's why people were getting it again.
Yeah, that's why people who had it got it again, because there were different variations.
Why did people that were vaccinated get it twice more after they're vaccinated?
Because there was more
variations.
That's
the whole point.
There's no difference here. It's a mute point on either side.
No. Hold
Both of them got it.
What?
Stop. If we had mass,
both people got it. I got it once, and I was unvaccinated at the time. My aunt got it twice, and she was vaccinated.
And people who got the booster, only like 79% of them never got COVID at all.
Yeah, but how many people got COVID after they had natural immunity? That's the data point you're missing. I pointed out earlier.
But it doesn't
just bring
matter
up a number.
because, like,
it does matter.
It does
because it's only relevant in comparison.
But can I finish
the other
the sentence,
data point.
buddy? Can I please finish the sentence?
I just don't understand why you don't think it's relevant.
Because people are dying in the process.
No,
if you can prevent people from dying in the process.
This is not about people dying. This is a very clear.
It is. That is the whole point of the argument.
Okay, well, both of you agreeing with each other makes your argument better.
No,
but my point is that
caring about people's lives make it better.
It's very clear here, right? You bring up the 79%, but you're missing a data point. So let me just explain this to everyone who's listening.
Okay,
so
hold up. Before you even go there, no. I'm not. Nope, you're not going to do it. You're not going to do it, bro. I will mute you. I will mute you. I will mute you.
Why don't you care about the other
I will
data
mute
point?
you.
Guys, hold on.
Why don't you care about the other data point? You won't let me explain.
It's not that I don't care
relevant.
about the data point. It's that people are dying in the process of it, and that's something you keep overlooking.
There's also people dying that were forced to get the vaccine, but we don't care about them.
No one once said anything like that. You literally just said it's not about lives, and that's the only thing that we've been advocating for the whole time.
I'm making a logical
No.
argument.
You're not making a point. You're trying to be pedantic and point out that if you have this weird data point, it might point to something off the wall or random.
It's
and I'm
not
telling
off
you,
the wall or random at all. You've only looked at one data point.
Okay.
You said 79% of the people who had the vaccine.
That's not the way this works, buddy.
What about
the
people who got natural immunity? What's that percentage?
Those people died. Those people can die too.
I'm looking.
Yeah, well, they can die, but we're talking about percentages.
Okay,
it's
so people that died from COVID in general?
You can look it up and prove me wrong.
How about people that died in COVID from general?
Perfectly fine doing that.
Okay.
No, you're talking about how.
No. Hang on. Hold up. Did anyone who died of COVID have a natural immunity?
Of course. No.
Of course.
Oh, natural immunity. Yeah, probably. Yeah.
And everyone who got COVID for the first time didn't have that natural immunity. So everyone who got COVID and died from it because they didn't have a natural immunity. Is that correct?
Everyone, say that again.
Everyone who got COVID and died from it the first time they got it died and they did not have a natural immunity.
Died and did not have natural immunity. The first time.
Yes, if they got COVID and they died the first time they got COVID, they died and they did not have a natural immunity because it was the first time they had COVID.
Yes, that's correct.
Then the data set is everyone who died from COVID. And I guarantee you that number is higher than the people that are dying after getting the vaccination. End of story. That is your data set. You're welcome.
No, I mean, I don't know what the number is. That's what I'm saying. I'm asking.
Okay, I'll just Google it for you real quick.
I literally said if you go back 20 minutes ago, I said if you could look up the relationship between someone who got natural immunity, and then you have to see if that at what percentage once they get natural immunity they pass it on, and you compare that to someone who got the vaccine and they have a greater percentage of not passing it on, then you've won your argument. What I'm saying is I don't know.
I don't see any data
All I'm saying is I
for
don't
that.
know.
Like I don't. Well, okay, so yeah,
you guys,
we
I
don't
mean,
like for
The
that.
answer is
For that you're talking about,
nearly
we don't know.
7 million.
nearly 7 million.
Yes,
7 million what?
7 million people died of COVID.
Yeah, but there's 230 million people in the United States. So my question is, and this is
most
the
people
data
say it's
point I was
closer to like
referencing,
300, but that's not really relevant.
or is it 300? Okay, but either
Yeah,
way, there's a couple
330
hundred
million.
million people in the United States. But in order for you, and it's look, this is not about me being correct or you being correct. I honestly don't care if I'm correct. All I care about is that in order for us to know what the truth is, we'd have to know the rate at which it was passed if you had natural immunity versus the rate at which it was passed if you were vaccinated. And if you could, if we could look at those numbers and it would show that it was higher, then I would say you would weigh the risk between your specific situation.
So we know that the least effective vaccine was effective at 79% of people never going to the hospital, never getting COVID and getting hospitalized for it or suffering serious illness or injury thanks to the vaccine. And we know that with the 756 million cases of COVID, 7 million people died from it, which is almost 10%. And given that if the vaccine, even if it were 100% effective, which we know it's not, but 79% effectivity of people not getting COVID again, means that you have a very low number of people who got COVID and died that were also vaccinated and died.
I just want to respond to someone in chat that they said like it sounded like we weren't considering the risk of people dying from the vaccines, and so I was looking on the data on that.
That's a good point.
Everything that I found was that it said it's really low. It wasn't I couldn't find a number. It's really low. The chances of dying from the vaccine was nowhere near as high as dying from COVID.
So, but you know what's funny though?
COVID has a 99% of survival rate unvaccinated. That's incorrect. Literally, it's killed 10% of the people who've had COVID.
So let me throw out two numbers.
Post a study in the chat, and
let me throw out two numbers that anyone can look up.
Anybody can look this up. WHO. Just Google.
So
not you. Sorry, Morpheus. I was responding to the person in the chat.
So let me bring up two honest questions from just an honest human being, one to know how the world works. This two questions. One, what does it mean when Dr. Fauci says that natural immunity is the best immunity over the vaccines? That's a good question. I'm not saying I know the answer to it, but why would someone say that if the vaccines were better? Okay, so that's one question. And number two, Dr. Fauci also said that the death rate of COVID-19 was around 2 to 3%. You're saying it's 10%, which is
I'm saying it's about 9. It's about 9.5, 9.3.
But you have to.
I don't know. I'm not super good at math.
Here's the difference between those two numbers. When we say causality versus cause versus correlation, when you look at the numbers, if you look just COVID by itself with zero comorbidities, it's like about 2%. So if you look, and the CDC actually divided this out on their website, and that's where I crunched the numbers for the death by driving.
Fine, but don't you think that
comparison
causes a problem for your argument?
No, I mean my argument is just some people's
let me just
health
put
needs to
that
be
together
considered.
for you real quick.
That's all I'm
saying.
To
say why I asked that way. It's because people that got COVID that also had comorbid diseases such as like obesity and heart disease were at higher risk of dying due to COVID. Is that correct?
Yes.
That's what you're saying, right? And
yes.
I agree with that. That's what the numbers say. I don't disagree with that stat. Obviously, the more things you have wrong with you, the easier it is to die, right? If you have a broken leg, it may not be as fatal as a broken leg and a gunshot wound.
But yes,
right?
Correct.
Okay, so with that in mind, having someone with comorbid diseases getting in contact with people who aren't vaccinated, who are healthy enough to get the vaccine, puts them at higher risk of death.
Without the vaccine and without natural immunity, yes.
Yeah. So people who get the vaccine
or have natural immunity.
Sure.
That's the better version. That's what Dr. Fauci said.
Okay, but you're missing out on all the variables of the
I
vaccine.
don't know why you keep saying that.
Because he's the leader. He was the one who led this whole vaccine.
Okay, but you're aware there are different variations of the the virus and of the vaccine,
right? Only covers one variation at a time. I mean, they have to update it based off of.
And then they put out what they've been calling boosters, right?
Correct.
And these boosters have additional versions of COVID that are also dead cells.
That's partly the truth, because some of the boosters
not partly
are
the truth. Like, for instance, there are Omicron variations of the booster.
But so the original boosters, though, like the original boosters were the same variation, but they were used to prolong the effects of the immunity on the body, because it was really a protein.
You're aware that there are boosters specifically geared towards variants, right?
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Just like the flu.
Yep, 100%. Just like the flu. Good. We're all on the same page. And so, just like the flu, when there's a new variation, someone that's never had it, even if you've had a different version of it, are susceptible to that variation.
100%. But to what degree is the question? Because because you're susceptible doesn't mean.
What if you could reduce that by at least 80% by getting a booster shot? And that's the lowest end of the spectrum.
That's the question. And
the answer is a vaccine, which we've tracked very meticulously on its efficacy, does that without fail at the lowest end.
I would be curious as to why natural immunity is so great. Why they say it's better than the vaccines.
I'll explain it to you, because I'll answer your question. The reason natural immunity is better than a vaccine is because a body actually gets a virus. And then what it does is the immune system actually takes on the virus. And it fights the virus. And sometimes,
I understand
depending on how
but
bad...
that's not what I'm asking. I understand
you asked
part.
exactly this question. Yes,
my
why is
question
natural immunity better than non-natural immunity?
Because we have the devil's in the
when you
details
get natural immunity, your body actually fights a living, active virus and attack on the body.
Yes, but when you say variation, that's a broad term. We don't know what changed.
Variant of
because some variants,
because that's why we named them something else.
No, I mean there's
no, that's exactly what happened. So
but you can't predict what's going to change. But my point is that there's a variation that occurs.
No, that's why there's
variation,
a bunch of different variations of the flu
shot. You can't predict exactly what's going to change.
But
hold on.
Flu shots. Let
me jump in here.
They pick the dominant variation. I just want to point out they build it off of that. I mean, there's still other variants.
Sure, you can't predict exactly what's going to change, but the fact that it's changing at all means that it means that it's going to be less likely. The vaccine is going to be less likely to be as effective because now it's different from what it was tailored to prevent.
Yeah, because it's
right. So the fact that these changes are being made at all. It means that this is bad.
So it depends on what the change is.
This is why we need herd immunity.
If I'll give you an example. If the change wasn't the spike protein, for instance, which is what the main, I would say all the different vaccines that were created were mainly, and this is just my understanding of the research and what was pushed out. The most of the vaccines targeted the spike protein because that's how the virus replicated. So the spike protein would come in, it would pierce the cell, and then it would put basically I think it's RNA or whatever the virus's genetic code was in the cell, and it would use the cell to mutate. My point is that if that's the main way that the virus is spreading its viral load, and that hasn't changed. In other words, there's different variants outside of the spike protein that are not effective in having it spread. You could be good with natural immunity for some period of time, and then at some point there'll be a situation where that spike protein changes.
So was that the case that was going on with COVID, with Omicron?
So I don't know whether the spike protein changed
or how it. I can say right now, like Omicron was like worse.
Yeah, I think it was worse, but harder to spread or something. I don't remember.
More contagious. So like,
if we just keep going down the road of like how vaccines work, I think it'll make sense to everyone. I swear.
Well, it's not. So for me, it wasn't the fact that vaccines don't work. Of course they do.
but do you know how we eradicated polio?
Yes, yes, and I
Are you
love
sure?
vaccines. I'm 100% for
Are
vaccines.
you aware that you're very likely to
We
receive
all
a
have.
polio vaccine when you were a
There are
child?
all great mandates for vaccines that exist for school children and everything else. Any reasonable person will look at it and say that too. But there's also reasons to reconsider a vaccine when it's not a viable option based off of a certain set of circumstances. In my case,
Okay,
a
like if you have an
mandatory,
allergic reaction or if you have a medical exclusion,
if you have
which
natural
applies to
immunity,
everyone on the.
if we
Well,
all had natural immunity at
you
the time of the
you have
mandates.
natural immunity to polio thanks to your parents, but you still got a polio vaccine.
Okay, so the point I'm making is that
You know
giving
why?
the,
Do
I
you know
mean,
why? That's my whole point. You don't know
what's
how vaccines work, right?
no,
Like I'm
I know
not
how
trying to.
vaccines work.
It's not trying to. I'm genuinely not trying to insult your intelligence. I'm just pointing out a fact
I'm a
that
reasonable
if
human
if you
being
knew how
that
vaccines
didn't,
work, you'd be aware of why we continue to give polio vaccines out to children,
but
even
if
though
you
there hasn't been
knew,
a case of polio in the United States in over 50 years. Like a
okay,
new case of polio, that is.
but I came on the podcast to argue why I didn't think a mandate during a very specific time during the COVID pandemic was not a good way to move forward,
Can
Do
we
you
because there
switch
do
are
you
gears?
think
people.
that we handled
So,
polio wrong?
Polio is not COVID-19.
can,
I agree. Do you think
It's
that
a
we handled it
completely different
incorrectly?
situation. So don't draw a
I
parallel that's
can we
not
agree. Do
switch
you
equal.
think we
gears to?
handled it incorrectly?
I'm not gonna equivocate on a parallel that's not equal.
So we used the
Yes, there are.
vaccine to eradicate a disease from the human population. We mandated it, and now
There's
every
lots of
child in the past,
situations where vaccines need to be mandated.
and
So,
I'm
every
not
child that
saying
got
that.
one in the
This is why
past
that's
50
all
so
right,
confusing
years
for me.
has helped.
hey guys. So,
We can say some
I
are
want to.
good and some aren't, and
Cool.
that's
So
okay.
I wanted to move like because
What
we've
time
been
is
on
it?
the efficacy of the vaccine for uh like good 50 minutes now. I
Oh, it
wanted to.
works. It's good. It works. It's just not for every single human. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so I mean, yeah, I mean, we both acknowledge that. That's the
That's
reason
all
why
I was saying.
well,
That's
that's
it.
the reason why it ought to be mandated because not
And you
everybody
should
could
have
get it.
allowed
So
medical exemptions for people that were fired. I mean, this seems to be
th-
common sense to me. If
there
you're
was medical exemptions, at least where I
in
work.
there was a medical exemption, so there were, but there were people who were fired because they couldn't prove that they're weighing their risk and reward of getting the vaccine wasn't,
Well,
um what they didn't take it into consideration. Like,
sure.
I could have gone to a
But hey,
doctor and seen if he would write me an
sure.
exemption, but that's money, that's time, and it's just common sense at the
So
time.
hey,
I'm not saying I shouldn't get a vaccine in 20 years, but at
so
the time it didn't make any sense.
So I got so there's a good friend of mine. Like he was like he's being like forced out of like uniform service for not being able to prove that it's gonna the vaccine's gonna have some adverse effects to his health, right? So and that's unfortunate. There's a lot of people that's in that situation.
You know what's unfortunate?
But no, hold on. Let me finish. So, but think about it like from the government's perspective, an organization's perspective, right? So you have a lot of anti-vaxxers here that aren't rational people who would just resort to lying just to avoid the vaccine. So how do you tell the difference if you throw out the requirement to prove that this is going to be a health risk to you?
Well, one thing that would be good is actually listen to people's concerns and be honest about the actual the effects of the vaccine. They weren't completely honest in the beginning. Okay, they didn't know that myocarditis was an issue. They didn't know that blood clots was an issue. There was at least one vaccine that was complete. No, hold up. There
That's
was at
not a
least
matter of
one
dishonesty.
vaccine. Hear me out. There was at least one vaccine that they had to take off of the market for a period of time. I don't remember how long it was, and it's because they only went through 90-day, or it was a 90-day trial. The point I'm trying to make is, let's be honest with these things.
No, it's called science. So here's the thing.
Yeah, the science.
Hold on.
They got it wrong.
No. Hold on, because you're talking about, you said the trial wasn't long enough.
Not the trial. No, I'm talking about after. So I think it was Johnson & Johnson, if I remember. They released it, and then they realized there were some issues. Okay?
Yeah, and then they pulled it back.
People died, and they pulled it back. My point is,
that's a good thing.
Instead of accusing people of just being anti-vaxxers and stupid, which of course there are a lot of those people.
Both of those things, there were anti-vaxxers and people who were stupid.
Yes, but
and
how
also people messed up with the vaccine, so they pulled it off the market.
But do you attract flies with vinegar or sugar? In my opinion,
I don't know.
Well, I'm just saying
I don't know.
that's an old saying, right?
I think
Look,
it's honey, but nonetheless.
it's yeah, sure, it's old and maybe it's cliche, but my point is that
Yeah,
was that
you would think that like the reducing your total risk of getting COVID and or death would
So
probably be beneficial, right?
well,
so
That
if you want to
seems
get
like
rid
a
of the
honey to me.
anti-vaxxers, just let them do
yeah,
it.
so there was a dangerous vaccine on the market and they pulled it, and you're using that as like a reason not to trust them.
No, no,
To
no,
me,
no,
that
no.
okay, so
If you look at the narrative surrounding the vaccine before it was launched, and the narrative surrounding the vaccine 6 months later, you saw that they didn't quite understand the
so
full effects
yeah,
of the
okay.
vaccine and what
So
would actually
here's
happen,
here's the thing. Here's the thing. This is why I was
specifically
telling.
with the
No,
term
no, 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 no,
breakthrough.
no. Hold on. This is why I was telling you it's important to not look at the media and actually look at the scientific literature,
But
right?
who
Because
looks at the
no, no, stop,
scientific
stop.
literature?
So, what I do, and more
I know,
people
but you're
should.
smart.
More people. Everybody's smart. So,
No, I
here's the thing. So,
don't
okay, we did not everybody's smart. There's some stupid people.
know.
Okay,
What I'm saying is
but no,
people follow the yeah.
this is what I want to say. So like, so when we talk about like the news, like these guys are just journalists, right? They're not experts,
They
right?
bring on experts.
Yeah, they're not.
Oftentimes they'll bring on
Well,
a
sometimes they bring
virologist
on
or something
experts,
like
but a
that.
lot of times they're not. They're not pathologists. They're literally journalists who writing stuff and they get things
Yeah,
wrong. Like
they they
I
run a
read
political narrative.
like I'm a physics nerd and I read some articles about new scientific studies, and I can show you all the time where the journalists are just getting the studies just wrong. A year ago, they were
Oh, I
saying how
100% agree with you.
they were saying that James
100% agree
Webb
with you.
disproved the Big Bang theory. It was just total
Yeah.
nonsense. They were
No,
just misinterpreting things. So
I'm right there with you, man. I
but,
understand that.
well,
But
sure. So
I'm
that's what I'm
just
saying. So it wasn't the sciences. Like if you look at the clinical studies, like I can post this link in the chat, and so it nowhere will you see it say that it is 100% effective. They give you ranges. Like
no.
Facade was quoting from it earlier. He talked about one of it was only 79% effective, right? So
So
there was people in the news that were
yeah.
saying you won't get you can just take your mask off and there's no
And where
risk
does
at
the
all.
news get their marching orders? Brought to
Well,
you by Pfizer, CNN. That's
well,
a commercial on CNN. But my point
yeah. I
is
mean,
this:
that's the conflict of
like,
interest. Sure.
yeah, there's a conflict of interest there, yeah, for sure. Especially when you talk about government money and mandates. Like, it makes a lot of financial sense to have 100% mandate for every single human being in America. It makes great financial sense, but it does not make medical sense if you are a physician and you're looking at me, for instance. It doesn't make sense for me to take it at that time. It may make sense for me to take the vaccine in 5 years, in 2 years, I don't know. But at that time, it didn't make sense. And to me, the mandate was, I could see a mandate for specific demographics that had comorbidities, that were above the age of 35, or but for children and for people who already had natural immunity at specific age groups, like that's all I'm saying. Like I'm
So
not an anti-vaxxer. I love vaccines. I love science. And that's the thing, is you group
so
me into this category of anti-vaxxers. Not that you did.
I haven't grouped you in that.
No, you're right, but people might say that I'm an anti-vaxxer just because I'm asking questions, because I'm a curious human being that's worried about my health. And I had the
So,
same issues in the government when I was when I was in the military service, and I was forced, excuse me, I was forced to take anthrax vaccines, which, by the way, the business that made those anthrax vaccines were extremely shady. They had already had like issues in the past with the vaccines that they had pushed out, and I knew
sure.
Marines
So
that were really like concerned. It wasn't because they were stupid or anti-vaxxers. It's because they questioned the pharmaceutical industry, which is what liberals used to do: question
well,
government and question
I can
pharmaceutical
tell you
industries.
I can
Now it's
tell you
crazy.
well I can tell you so the like so like the drug business, like they make a lot of money from drugs,
Oh, I
right?
know.
But
I've watched a lot of those
vaccines in
documentaries.
particular, there really isn't a lot of money in that. Like
There's
I
not a
mean,
lot of money in the biggest pandemic in the vaccine.
in the vaccines, no. In drugs, yeah. But vaccines, no. Like
My understanding
there's
is that there was
there's
a
a very low
contract.
from what I saw. From what I saw, there's a very low profit margin. Somebody trying to
Uh,
a drug company trying to get rich off of vaccines
there
is just a fool's
we
errand.
so
You're better off just using drugs,
but here's
which
the
is
other
what they're
thing.
doing.
But we've also ignored a few different conversations,
But
and we can't get into them because it's obviously already 7. But there were people, professors, doctors, virologists, that were bringing up concerns that were censored. Okay, and we'll leave it at that because we can't get into those details. But when a Johns Hopkins virologist says, "Hey, we might have a concern here because of myocarditis," we may want to just kind of listen to him. I'm not saying he's correct. I don't know.
But we did a study on it, and we looked at the risk, and we realized it
And
was very low.
no, it wasn't, because it was on my package. So when I got vaccinated, I
It
read all
was,
the hear me
but
out.
like you
When I
said, it
got
was
vaccinated,
18 in a million.
no, if it was 18 a million, they wouldn't have put an emergency warning. So basically, on the vaccine
They
package,
didn't know this information at the time. Like the stuff is constantly changing.
at,
This is another thing. But so like because people was talking about how
there's a
the like
warning
Fauci,
label.
they were talking about how Fauci he was like contradicting himself
But
because the situation was changing.
the
Remember, there was one time he was telling people
but
not
it
to
was
wear
at
masks,
least it
and
was
then
at
he was
least
saying wear the mask. The
yes, yeah,
situation was
because
evolving.
well,
So
that was he shouldn't have said it. But the point is that on the warning label, one of the issues that was on the warning label, regardless of what the percentage of it being effective is, right? Because we don't really know 100%. I'm sure we can find out in the future, and I'm sure we'll know in the future. But the point is that on the warning label, myocarditis was listed, so it was known. To what degree that it affected you depended on your biology, if you're gender, if you're female, or if you're male. Um, and your health history, and so anyway, but the point is I didn't feel like I should have been, either forced to take the vaccine or lose my job. I thought that was unfair, and that's all I'm trying to say. And yes, I think that a lot of people should have taken the vaccine, and you could have even had mandates for specific demographics of people. But
it sounds like you're saying so like it wasn't flexible enough, but you're not against the mandate.
it
If you
should have
want
been
to call it
flexible for people who felt like the risk wasn't worth the reward. Your
okay,
point is that,
so
well, what do you do about
now
people who
we disagree. So now we disagree again. So because it shouldn't be just based on your feelings. We're talking about carrying a disease that was killing a pile of people. That's killing people that can't be vaccinated against it. So we don't want this to be based on how you feel, right? Not
yeah,
because you
but some
feel like
people
the risks aren't worth it. Like there ought to be like some tangible, real data
yeah,
backing
but
up
some
what you're
some
saying.
people feel like a potential life in their womb is worth killing. You know what I mean? And we allow that. So how about if
We
I
can
feel
do it.
like,
So no, this is
but I
very
feel like,
different. So,
if I
are
feel,
you
well,
talking
not,
about abortion?
I'm saying that you have a
You said
potential life.
because okay, so are you arguing that
You're
because
asking
abortion is
about
illegal,
you're
we
asking about
shouldn't have to take the vaccine?
when should the government step in and say you will do this, right? And I think that there should be some room for some wiggle room. That's all I'm saying.
Okay, so
That's a reasonable
that's what I was
proposition, I would
asking.
say.
So no. So that's what I was asking. I'm going to clarification because you were it sound I had asked if it's because it sounded like to me that you were saying like it wasn't flexible enough. You wanted it to I guess allow a little more latitude for
Well, yeah,
exemptions. Okay,
yeah.
but then this is where it broke down at because
Hmm.
then you said we should allow exemptions when people feel like the risk isn't worth it. And I'm saying that should not be the case.
Well,
We don't want to rely on people's feelings. We want data. We
yeah,
want to do this is a pandemic. So we're talking about science, using science to fix something. We don't
yeah.
even rely on people's feelings.
Well, I think that's a good point. I don't want to
Okay.
argue with that. I think that if I feel like it's a risk to me because I've read what myocarditis is, I've read what the risk factors are, and I go to my physician and they say, we see that. And honestly, if I had gone to a physician, maybe they would have, you know, wrote me an exception or something like that. But I don't know that everyone was afforded that opportunity. I would say that in the government, you had a period of time. I think you had 60 days or something to process the DD form, whatever. It's an attestation form, and if you didn't get the
So that's two
vaccine,
whole months.
you had to get.
That,
Yeah,
that's 2 whole months. Like, that's and like you don't want to make it longer than that because in the meantime you could be getting this disease and spreading it to people and killing it. So
but you know what's
there ought to be a time restraint
you know,
on this.
but you know what's
You
funny
don't want to
though
make it
is
indefinite.
if you look at the time period that we were forced to get it, they basically said you have 60 days, whatever. That was during the time I actually had to wait for Johnson and Johnson, which had the lowest myocarditis. Like it had the least effect on your heart and
Yeah,
those
I
types
mean,
of things.
I had to wait too because of
I
my
had to
age,
wait,
and then in Virginia they had something else like for there was like a body fat
but
requirement.
isn't
It
that
was kind of weird.
but
So
isn't that
like
crazy? At the same time, there's a mandate the vaccine is like literally being like studied again to figure out if it's, what the risk is. How could a doctor even prescribe me a good,
So
physician's
so
report
so
if
here's the
we
thing.
don't
So like
even know?
clinical studies with vaccines normally take years. Like
Yes,
normally they take
correct.
about it take like an entire decade. So
Correct.
it's a
That
very
was Trump's.
it's,
Trump had a thing. It was called like,
yeah.
I don't know. It was you. Basically, it was like Warp Speed or something. Operation Warp Speed, and he got the FDA to streamline it, which is funny because if you think about it, if Trump had gotten reelected, this would be way more controversial. I feel like. But anyway,
No, it was so
you don't think so?
the problem with Trump was that
He did get the Warp Speed
he was
going though. That was the
undermining. No, the
FDA
problem is that
piece.
he was undermining it the entire time and politicized it. He
Well,
politicized the
he got
mask.
the he
The
got
the
he
mask
got the
turned political, and the vaccines turned political because of
but he
Trump.
but no he if you look at the actual legislation, what he did was he got Warp Speed, all of these pharmaceutical companies and the FDA on the same page in order to get the fastest vaccine out possible.
From what I
The
saw, that was already in
No,
place.
that wasn't that
So
was Trump that did that. But
I challenge you to go look at Neil deGrasse Tyson's podcast about this because he had a doctorate. They've been planning for a pandemic like this for
yeah, but the
since like
Operation Warp
20
Speed
years.
was his ability to get all of the public, or not the public, the private sector folks in with the FDA. You have to understand this is like the fastest vaccine that's ever been approved
Sure.
for. Yeah.
Okay. Well,
So
I mean,
anyway, the
I
point
don't.
I'm trying to make is that it's funny how like there seems to be a political spin regardless of, depending on who gets it approved. I just think that they should have taken a little bit more time and they should have laid out the facts a little bit better.
Here's the thing. So
We
you
probably
said
would have had more people get
you said
vaccinated.
so you had to take a little bit more time. So right. So like each of the vaccines were had an individual study. There's what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 different vaccines. Each of them had a study lasting months, all of them involving at least 30,000 people, some upwards of
Really?
50,000
I
people.
heard Neil deGrasse Tyson say 1,000
Yeah,
on a
who's wrong? Well, yeah,
podcast.
he's wrong. I have to stay right here.
It was
It was
30,000.
yeah, it was the minimum was 30,000 people. That was the
Yeah, I think
lowest.
it wasn't the
So
amount of people, it was the time frame. So they were looking for long-term
yes,
effects.
yeah, so but here's the thing. So here's the thing. So like we could wait long term. We could do like a 10-year study before we roll out the vaccine, but you got to weigh the risk. You have this real threat. While we're waiting for this study to happen, people are dying. The economy shut down. The government is at a halt.
Yeah, it's a gamble. It's a gamble
Yeah, I mean,
because you could
to
release
me,
a vaccine and it could kill
it's
even more people in 10 years
yeah,
because you didn't do the long-term study, which is what they're worried about right now. I've actually seen
that's
studies on
that's a
this.
possibility. Also, while you're waiting, that virus is mutating, and now your vaccine is less effective at fighting it because now it's evolved in such a thing. So here's the thing. So we had a real risk, like a real visible imminent threat facing us, right? And so we had a solution for it, the vaccine. And it sounds like you're suggesting that we should have just
We should have let
yeah,
people make the decision
we
on their
should have
health with their doctors.
we should have just let this risk materialize, this imminent risk materialize.
First of all,
Because
it wasn't
no,
mandated to
hold
civilians.
on, because you said let this risk materialize because there's a potential risk somewhere else. Like it's like this. Like you're in a building and it's on fire, right? You see the fire, it's smoking. You're gonna die if you stay in there. And I say, hey, here's the exit, and you say
2%
no,
chance
no,
of
no, no,
dying
no,
in
no,
this
no, no,
situation.
hold on. And I say, if you sound like you don't want to take the exit because outside the door there could possibly be somebody with a machine gun.
I think
Sure, that's possible.
that's not a great parallel in
Well, no, it
terms
is.
of
It is.
actual
No, because
percentages. If
no,
you're in a
no,
building with
no, no.
fire, you're screwed. I mean, especially
You
if
see,
there's
no, no,
only
no.
one
Okay, no, no,
exit.
no. Here's the thing. So, like, in the pandemic, you yourself may have been okay, right? But millions of other people were dying. Hospitals were filled to the brink. They couldn't even treat people. You get it. You died.
I actually
So,
find that hard to
okay.
believe
So
as well.
no.
I
What
don't
are you
think that
talking?
that's necessarily
The
true.
Navy took a ship up to New York City because the
And
hospital.
no one got on it. It left. Actually, I know that story. Yes, Trump sent a naval ship, and it never
You,
got used.
okay, you're saying the hospital beds weren't filled across the
In
country?
I'm saying that if they were filled, there's actually there's about
I don't,
3 things to consider in this argument that I would have to like talk
okay,
about, because
so
you have
are
to
you
talk about
saying the hospital
furloughed
beds weren't
folks.
filled?
I'm saying that you have to consider multiple variables. Like, for instance, there was a bunch of furloughs. In other words, hospitals weren't getting the income they normally were, so they laid off a bunch of people, which reduced the amount of hospital beds and physicians and nurses that could work on them. But in the case of the ship that was sent to New York, it was never used. You can look it up. So
Okay,
if there
sure.
was people
Okay,
overflowing,
I mean,
then where did they go?
I didn't know the ship was never used. But all
I
I'm
looked into that because I thought that it would be a good idea. I thought that they would use it. They didn't use it. And I don't know if that was politics, like the Democrats in New York didn't
sure.
want to send
Okay, but
people. I don't know.
it's really a side point. That's really just icing on the cake.
Sure, sure.
The argument was when I talked about the building being on fire, you're definitely going to die. And in the
Yes,
pandemic,
that's not the
you're
case with the
probably not, but
pandemic.
other people are. And it sounds like you're saying, hey, forget them. I'm
No,
okay.
absolutely not.
Well,
Actually, I would have
okay, then what are you
advocated for
talking
a
about? There's only
mandatory
a 2%.
lockdown
Then what are you talking about? There was only a 2% chance. There wasn't a 2% chance
for
that people are going to die. There was 100% chance that people were dying because that's exactly what was
that's
happening. So, and when I'm saying
okay.
this,
That's an interesting way to look at it. But the point is that I actually advocated for lockdowns and mandates for high risk folks. They didn't never do that. They just locked everyone down, which is not a good idea, because COVID-19 was an airborne virus, which means breathing air in the
so
same room
yeah,
is
okay.
actually
I mean,
bad.
so we can Monday.
So
So no, we can Monday
I was
morning court.
actually, I have lots of,
Okay, but
not
hey,
Monday morning quarterback. I had a plan like
that's
in the beginning.
exactly what you're doing because here's the thing: like they didn't know what to do. Like so, this was
I
like
knew what to do. I looked at
sure
I looked at the information.
you know how to solve the pandemic. You're
Yeah,
saying
it was common sense to
okay.
me. You
What
look
was
at
the
the
common?
people that
Your common sense was
I
natural
honestly
immunity,
I've
which is
had
just natural selection.
no, I had actually I had this conversation with friends of mine. I said, look, you look
You're
at the people that are in the highest risk categories, and you push vaccines, and you push isolation and lockdown, and you let the economy continue because they have an extremely low chance.
the
Less, it's
point.
about the
So
same as the
no,
flu,
wait,
maybe twice,
Morpheus.
2%.
Listen to what listen to what I'm saying. All right, so let's think about
But
it. No, hold on. The people with the highest the people with the highest level of risk, right? And you said like the people who are definitely going to be sick. Let's say you
isolate.
only yes, okay. Let's say you only make them get the vaccines, right?
No,
And
not only them, but I would say that's that you want to focus it on the people who are at the highest risk, and you also want to
okay,
focus
so
isolation on the highest risk
how long are
folks.
they supposed to be isolated?
I would say until the vaccines came out, because they didn't have vaccines
Okay,
for
but
a long
then the
time.
vaccines are out there. Then who takes it?
So first, you take the highest risk folks, you give it to them first. I think they actually had this
Okay,
approach to a certain degree.
So this is the point I was going to try to make. So the high
Yeah,
risk people, if only they take it,
I
right?
didn't need it.
No,
I had natural immunity.
hold on. If only the high risk people take it, and then let's say us healthy people get COVID, and we're just spreading it around. Do you realize that the virus is mutating from person to person? And then by the time they come out, they are vaccinated against the original version, but then there's some variant that's least effective, and
Yeah.
then
So
they can
what do you
catch.
do in that situation?
And then
You can't just continue to pump
the
out.
solution is herd immunity. That's
Okay,
the solution.
yeah, that's one way to look at it. I mean,
Well,
look,
that is the
I think
solution.
that,
That's what they were trying to do, but people was like,
yeah.
no, and so you had these
The
variants
question
floating
is
out there.
the question is to what degree. I understand what you're saying. Look, this is a complicated subject. They're going to debate this for years. I don't think this is settled. I think in 100 years they'll still look at this situation as a kind of the first pandemic in modernity, and say, what did we do good and what did we do wrong. I don't think any of us would agree we executed perfectly on
Oh
the
no,
plan
yeah,
that was already
I agree.
there.
I agree.
And because
There
was a
was
plan in place. They have a plan for pandemics, but
yeah. Plants
this was
don't
a
survive contact with the enemy,
there you
as you
go.
know. Yep.
There you go. And but here's my thing. The anti-vaxxer folks, a lot of them paid the price because they got COVID and they died. Okay.
Yeah.
And they also spread it to folks that that were vulnerable in communities that were vulnerable. All I'm asking for is consideration for the folks that are not going to spread it, and that are taking on a higher risk by taking the vaccine. If you can prove that they have equal or higher chance of spreading it, then I will grant you the argument, and I'll say I'm wrong. Everyone should get vaccinated as a mandate, and
So
incur whatever
so
tertiary
my,
risk that comes with it.
so
That's my
so
only point.
so my thing is, like, regardless of whether they have equal or higher risk of spreading it, right? What you want to do is eliminate it altogether, kind of like what we did with polio, right? Because if only half the population got polio, and then let's say polio was mutating just as fast as COVID, right? So then polio is jumping around and changing, and now by the time it comes back to a vaccinated person, it looks very different, and now
But
their antibodies aren't equipped to fight it. So that's what I'm saying. Like, it doesn't.
I
That
don't
wouldn't.
think that
That
works
wouldn't
like
work.
that. There's a reason why the flu still exists. COVID's different than polio. I think that was my kind of counter argument. I don't know all of the facts, and I'm not a virologist, and I'm not a scientist. I'm just some random guy having a conversation with some people, right? But my point is, I think that the COVID is more like the flu and influenza and those types of things, SARS, and so the variations are so rapid that I'm not sure that you can stamp it out or stomp it out in the same way that you could polio. That's a great question for a virologist. I don't know, but if you could, then your argument would make sense. If you can't, then my argument makes sense. And so I
Well,
don't know the outcome, and so I could be
well,
wrong, I could be right, but
I can tell you. So that. I don't see any other way, because not only do we need to stop this virus from spreading, like, we need to stop it from mutating, and in order for that to happen, you have to eliminate it.
I don't know if that's even possible, man. Maybe
Well,
it is. I don't know.
or get it really close to elimination, because
Right.
that is what was going on. This was like evolution in real time, but it was happening really fast.
Yeah,
So
I
you
think one thing you should look at is the way that the definition of vaccine has changed over the last 10 years, because they've broadened the category of vaccination by quite a bit in terms of immune response versus immunity. And so I think that that's probably one component to this word vaccine. I I think that if you look in the past, vaccine, the way it was defined, was providing immunity, whereas today it's an immune response that doesn't necessitate immunity. And that's a big point, because if it doesn't necessitate immunity, then that means that people can still get it, pass it on, and it can still continue to produce variants.
well,
I
I
think
think
that's a
that
good point to look into.
I think there's a gap between what people learn from the media and what the scientific literature is saying. Because, like, if you read the science, so I understand. So
Oh,
people,
100%. There was
the
lots of
news
media
was
organizations that got it wrong,
yeah, the news was telling people that you could get this, you get the vaccine, and you
and you're
never
good. And
yes,
but see, that's the thing, is
and
if you look at the
the science
2018 CDC definition, that makes sense, right? If they're going off of an old definition, and they just updated the definition in
sure. So
2022. So, and I don't know why
regardless
they did that, but
But
it's
regardless of the definition, you could just look at the clinical studies, and you could see that it wasn't 100%. Like, I got it
yeah,
pulled
but
up
the
right now.
variation, I think the
So,
variation, but
the,
so I hate to, like, I actually have to leave. I'm 20 minutes over my time limit
oh,
here.
gotcha.
I know we normally cut off at 7. I hate to cut off. I could talk for another 2 hours,
All
but
good, man.
I,
Well,
I I have to draw a line.
all good. Well, hey, bro, thanks for coming on, man.
Oh
As
yeah,
always, it was a pleasure. Nice
yeah.
fiery debate. We
Sorry,
always
yeah,
enjoy that.
sorry I got heated there for a little bit.
No, that's what we wanted.
You guys you're doing the right thing, right? Probing and prodding to see what the best outcome is, and to a certain degree, I'm doing the same thing. So, no, I appreciate the debate, and I look forward to another one.
Most definitely.
All right,
All right, bro.
all right. Take
I'm
care.
All right, you too, my man. I don't know where for Facade. Where'd you go?
I turned off my camera because I was my computer froze up, as you were aware, for a bit.
Yeah, I saw that.
I didn't want it to continue to do that, so I just been muted and listening.
We got a comment.
Couple,
Kyle
yeah, I was
Vincent.
gonna say there's a couple comments in
Yeah, so
the thing.
it says Morpheus understands reality. Natural immunity was found to be the same or better than the vaccine in a study of 65 countries. So, like, we had talked about this at the beginning. So the natural immunity is just natural selection, right? Because not everybody lives long enough to produce those antibodies. Some people catch COVID and just die.
Yeah, I
So
mean,
that's
this is kind of why
that,
I wanted to get on the point and make the point of how vaccines actually work and how the body uses vaccines to fight off things like COVID and the flu, because no one disagrees that natural immunity seems to be more effective than a vaccine. The problem is getting the disease ends up killing people, whereas people who die from the vaccine much, much, much less often, if ever. Like in the cases of a polio vaccine, I don't think anyone died from it. Versus, like,
I mean, so like this is the response to Kyle Vincent. So like I mean, if you wanted a population that was the population on the planet, you wanted everybody to be resistant to COVID, and you want to completely eradicate it, spread it. Force everybody to get it. Just give COVID to everybody, and
and then when there's a new virus or a new variant of it, we should take that and spread it too.
Yes, and the ones who aren't healthy enough will die and not reproduce, and bam, that is natural selection. That is how you do it. That is what natural immunity is going to do, and that's what we don't want. We
But I
want
mean, like, and I hate to take
live.
it to this extreme, but maybe it'll help people understand how bodies work and how viruses work against the body. Is that HIV? The HIV is a virus, right? So it's the human immunodeficiency virus, right? So something along those lines. But you know why we don't have like vaccines against the HIV virus, and why like we don't just spread it? Because most people that get it die. So, like, once you have it, it's a virus that we essentially don't know how to beat, right? Versus viruses like polio and measles and mumps that we've come up with solutions to help nearly eradicate, if not completely eradicate, from society, came through herd mandates. Whereas if you just allow people to take it at their own will and take it at their own risk, or your idea is to assume that anybody can get it and it's fine and that'll give them natural immunity, there's a reason you're not willing to get injected with HIV. I promise. Like, you're not going to volunteer for it. And you're like, well, that's an extreme case. You're not wrong. I get that it's an extreme case. But that's my point, is that you may not know what underlying effect COVID might have on someone who gets COVID. And you're not the only person that it's going to affect, because unlike HIV, COVID spreads airborne and it can live on the surfaces, even up to like cardboard, up to 12 to 16 hours. So even if you go and you do what Morpheus was saying about giving it to people, isolation, and then giving it to people who are at most risk first, you have two problems that exist. Who's going to take care of them in the meantime? Because then you're coming into contact with people who are typically considered healthy. And then what happens when the virus mutates, because not everyone's immune? So that's the reason that essentially things like the measles, polio, mumps vaccines are mandatory in the United States for all children. Because you don't want any of those coming back. And you're not mandatorily infecting people with like HIV. So knowing a very basis of how these things work really kind of, no one's saying that natural immunity isn't better. And it's great if you're a healthy, younger to middle-aged adult who can get it and fight it off, because your body will have a natural, better response if you come into contact with the virus in the future. The problem is, what if you're not one of those people? Are you willing to risk putting other people at risk by getting it, or coming into contact with people because you get it and because it's airborne? And that's the whole point. Like, and I think if we had just kind of stayed on the conversation, that's essentially how, if you just get the basics of how vaccines work and why you don't force people to get things like HIV like mandatory HIV viruses, or why you don't force people to get force people into a situation of like where like polio is mandatory, and why we haven't seen a new case of polio in the United States in like 50 years, with exception of I think there was one potential case that arose in the United States that was strictly in a anti-vax environment, but that only goes to further the point that like mandating and herding is really important. So like that's why, like Kyle, that's the answer. The answer is no one disagrees that natural immunity is better, but that doesn't mean we should exclude people that can't fight it off. Just like people that get HIV, we don't just be like, ah, well, you're going to die anyway. No need for treatment. Like, you know. And then Jesse, which is a good buddy of mine, which I don't remember if you've ever met. I think you have.
I know who he is.
But he commented a couple things like New York was running out of places to bury people, which is accurate.
Yeah.
And then it says why natural immunity. What happens when everybody catches COVID and overwhelms our hospital? Another good point that we were talking about, like people that have actual emergencies are waiting in line behind 50 people who have COVID. So you go into the hospital and you're missing an arm, but there's 55 people in front of you who have COVID. Even though you're healthy and your body might eventually fight it off, now you have a missing arm and you're fighting COVID. Like, that's just bad situation. And this says mandating a vaccine puts young, healthy people in danger when they weren't otherwise. A very minimal risk to their otherwise overall health, and reducing the number of diseases overall and reducing the number of people that come into contact with COVID. Yes, you're absolutely right. I agree. If that's what you mean by that. And if you disagree with that, you can come on and talk about it. But by giving natural, healthy people, young people a vaccine, they're very unlikely to have any strong negative side effects. B, it puts them at a bare minimum 80% chance of not getting hospitalized or getting COVID in the future. And since you don't have COVID in the future, you're less likely of spreading COVID in the future.
Yeah, the main point is that really, like, there's no way to avoid risk. You're saying it puts healthy young people in danger. Like, there's risk either way. But which risk is worse? And from what we saw, no vaccine is definitely a higher risk. Than
when you have people that are dying from it, when you have it spreading faster than we can contain it, when you have it spreading to people that you know, even though you're healthy, you spread it to someone who's not as healthy, who can't handle it as well, that ends up in the hospital because of it, that does permanent damage to things like their lungs and heart, where that's not a vaccine, that's a disease that's doing it, and these people are trying to fight it off. So that's where the risk really comes into play. Like, if you're so selfish that you think that I'm a young, healthy adult, I should be able to do what I want, sure, isolate from everyone that may be at higher risk, which is going to be a lot of people. So,
I like that. It's getting kind of late.
Yeah. One more thing. Go ahead.
Well, I was gonna say. I wanted to. He says vaccine also doesn't prevent transmission, just reduces symptoms. To change definition of vaccine as soon as this one came out. I mean, Morpheus said that. I mean,
there's two things there.
Yeah,
I don't see.
I don't know how to. I'm just regurgitating the points that we already made.
Yeah, I don't see a change in the definition, at least scientifically, of what a vaccine is for or what it does. No one ever claimed vaccines gave 100% immunity. They said it's an efficacy against for prevention of disease. That's how it was measured.
Here's just referring to like the CDC apparently changed their definition right before the pandemic. Okay. That's what he's referring to. So like, I mean, I regardless of what the CDC says, there's no honest scientist that would tell you that the vaccine provides 100% immunity.
Yeah, no worries, Kyle. We just wanted to point that out. And if you're referring specifically to the CDC definition, that's not something I was aware of. I'm not saying that they didn't do that. I'm just saying in the scientific community, most people refer to vaccines as a reduction of risk and percentage of people likely to get a disease in the future based off of the antibodies developed by that person receiving the vaccination. So I know that's a really long-worded definition, but that's essentially exactly how scientists would say vaccines work, which is really important to know. So The long and the short of that is that I don't like if the CDC did. Sorry, that's okay. But the point is that by not getting the vaccine, you're more likely to get COVID, which puts you at higher risk of transmitting COVID because it's not possible to give COVID to someone if you don't have COVID. And I get there's like asymptomatic carriers that happened all the way back in the era of like Typhoid Mary. That happened with COVID. People were getting like asymptomatic COVID. But we're not saying people that get COVID. We're saying the people that have COVID, you're reduced by 70%, almost 80% in cases just by getting the vaccine. And that's on the low end of the spectrum. So if you don't get COVID, you're not likely to get COVID in the future. Or not likely to spread COVID because you don't have it. So
also, all right, Kyle, if you disagree, hit us up, man. Come on the show. We want more guests.
also, you
Anybody in
don't
the
have to come
comments.
talk about that. You can talk
Yes,
about
you can talk about
like,
anything. Go watch our videos. If there's something you disagree with, come on.
yeah.
But the vaccine
Other than
doesn't
that,
prevent
we
cancer.
should wrap it up. I know you said you have to go. So let's go
Yeah.
ahead and do that. I'm gonna
We
switch
can talk
over to our
about
last question. Last
talk about
screen.
what's coming on. So next week we're going to be doing a response video to a YouTube apologist. So stay tuned to that. We won't have a guest. We'll be playing the video from here, and we'll just do like a we'll stop it whenever he says something that we disagree with, which is going to be pretty often. You'll see. And also what's in the works right now is with what's his name? There's another podcaster named Joseph Jackson, and he got a friend named K-Dub, Chris.
Williams?
Chris Williams. Yeah, he's a reformed apologist. He'll be coming on, and he be coming to argue why Christianity is better than, I don't know, atheism, secular humanism. I'm not sure, but we're gonna have a conversation about that.
Also, if you're this far and you'd like to see shorter videos, comment, say so, because we've been considering and kind of getting tied up in the process for a while of creating just like not shorts like you've seen. We put out a few shorts on our YouTube channel, but we mean like short 5 to 10 minute long, just like really brisking through a conversation of something instead of these deep dives, just to kind of get more content out there and grow the channel. So if you have any suggestions, or if you have anybody that wants to come on, or you know somebody that might be interested, A, send them our way. B, come join the show. We'd love to have you on as a guest, love to have you on as a speaker, love to have you on to debate with. So whether we agree or whether we disagree, whether you just want to have a conversation, that's all good. And yeah, anything else you wanted to add?
Nope. I'm good. If guys, if you know anybody who look at our video, subscribe to our channel if you haven't. Please do. If go through our videos, if you want to debate the topic, if we said something stupid, you disagree, we're dead wrong. Come on, hit us up. Come on. If you have a friend, pastor, or some smart guy, doctor, whatever, you want to bring them on to challenge us on anything, hit us up. Email us, comment on our video. We want to argue.
Yep.
That's what we do.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys next week for a reaction video instead of our normal style debate. We may have the call up on the screen, so if you want to defend the video, or if you want to try to argue against us and our analysis of the video, we'll have our call-in number up, and we'll see you then.